right, joining me now to break down some top storylines and best bets ahead of Week 11 of the NFL season. There's our guy from the 3 and Out podcast, John Middlekauff. John, how you making out today?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
Good. I think we're at this point of the season where we get at this point every season where everyone's complaining about the primetime games. They're boring, they're low scoring, they're sloppy, they're lopsided. But it is what it is. We talk about this every single season. So let's start with the fallout from the Monday Night Football game. An ugly win, by the Eagles, but I think a pretty good win. Their best defensive performance of the season. Do you think you can definitively say that the Eagles are the best team in the NFL right now?
I don't think you can say that. I mean, I would say Seattle and the Rams are on the collision course this weekend to kind of prove that the way they're playing. I mean, the Rams are blowing out people. To me, it's regardless of opponent. When you blow out back to back to back opponents and just dominate them, like in the NFL, this is not college football. So the Rams are playing at such an elite level. I actually think Seattle has better personnel. Now we're going to find out with Sam Darnold if he can play up to this level against the best teams, because I think that's kind of the lingering elephant in the room. But the one thing with the Eagles is they have an elite defensive coordinator, and they add Jalen Phillips. I mean, one thing they were missing a little bit was some edge. So you get Jalen Phillips, who immediately kind of pops. You get Brandon Graham off the couch, who made a play last night on an end around. So you just add some depth there. What's his name? Jalix Hunt, who was drafted in the third round a couple years ago, was all over the place last night. We know how good Jalen Carter is. Mitchell's one of the best corners in the league. Cooper DeJean's a fantastic slot receiver or slot corner covering, quicker receivers. And their linebacker play is excellent. I mean, they got Nakobe Dean. They drafted Jahad Campbell in the first round, and Bond was an all-pro last year. So their personnel on defense is actually pretty good. And to me, the issue with the Eagles is last year why they became an unstoppable force. Like every other play, they would bust like a 50-yard run. I mean, Saquon was an unstoppable running back, right? Because their offensive line. Well, their offensive line now, Lane's been banged up a couple times. He tried to gut it out last night, but the center position has fallen off since Kelsey retired. And their guard spots, I mean, they have an injury. Dickerson has been banged up. And right guard, they lost Becton, so they don't dominate on the ground. But they still have A.J. Brown that they never really throw to. But Devontae Smith, like, probably the best 168-pound NFL player that wasn't a kicker ever. I mean, he's pretty incredible for a guy that doesn't even weigh 170 pounds. Goddard's a stud, and at any moment, A.J. Brown is on the field. So, like, the reason Howie gets a lot of credit is their roster is pretty loaded. Like, the Packers' defense is really good. I actually, like, once it kind of ended, I thought, well, if you were the Eagles, because you kind of look at their schedule, it's a lot of, like, Washingtons and Dallases, and they're going to win a lot of games. But they had this 2-game stretch. Packers in Lambeau and then the Lions off a short week. I think it's one of those, like, it's almost like a playoff series, right? With 7-game series. We're on the road. If we split 1-1 and come home, we're good. So they won that game. In a little bit, they're playing with house money against – they win this Lions game, they're probably headed right down to the wire for the number 1 seed. They lose it, not that big a deal because they end up going to rattle off a bunch of – now, it might cost them the 1 seed, when the dust settles. But I think winning that game last night was huge.
Okay, so let's talk about the other side of this. The Green Bay Packers really underperforming. I thought Jordan Love was crowned a little bit too early as the next great Packers quarterback. He's not living up to that.
I'm guilty.
Yeah, well, Matt LaFleur's kind of falling off a little bit of a cliff here too. Some just really ugly play calling. So how long do you think the Packers organization will tolerate this level of underperforming from the coach and the quarterback?
Yeah, to me, Love was bad in the first half. And if I hear one more time, well, their offensive line was they lost. It's like, welcome to the NFL. Ask Justin Herbert what it's like to play behind that off. Ask Patrick Mahomes last year what it was like. It's like guys get injured. Ask Mac Jones, who's running for his life, throwing for 300 yards. Jordan Love was bad. He actually played pretty well in the second half, but I thought the coach was atrocious. When you get illegal formation penalties, that's on the coaching staff. Period, point blank, end of story. So, like, that's on the floor. And it happened twice. Once on the play action where, I mean, it cost him a huge first down. And then the other time on the 4th down call, which obviously blew up in Matt's face, someone sent me the clip that they were calling out the play the Eagles were before they even ran it. But even if they would have gotten it, they would have come back because it was a penalty on the Packers. So penalties are killing them. Obviously they have some injuries on their skill guys and guys aren't coming through. They're in shambles offensively. And what's really going to cost them, like at the end of the day, losing to the Eagles, who are the defending champs, with, the Browns have been right up there as the most expensive roster, but like an expensive roster that's actually works and is good, doesn't kill you. You just can't lose to the Panthers. You can't lose to the Browns, and you can't tie the Cowboys. So it's a little like Penn State with James Franklin. Losing to Oregon didn't get him fired. Losing to Northwestern, losing to UCLA, like that did him in. What did Brian Kelly in at LSU was having Ole Miss slap you, not losing to Alabama. So to me, the LaFleur pressure, it comes to a head after last night, but it's the simmering and the domino effect of the previous week losing to the Panthers, who I had to go back and watch. I didn't watch much of that game on Sunday. Like Tyler Shuck made Bryce Young look like a JV player. You can't lose that game. Same thing with the Browns, where they had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. Like, so if they end up not winning this division, and I would say right now it's going to be difficult for them because their margin for error is a hard team to trust. They got injuries now. He clearly, there's some growing pressure, and you can feel it coming.
Okay, so one team that will be looking for a new coach for sure is the New York Giants. It was announced on Monday that Brian Daboll got canned. No reason to break that down. I thought that it was long overdue. But who do you think could be a good candidate for the job? I'd be surprised if they went after a young coordinator type. I think they need a bit of stability. It has been a bit of a revolving door of head coaches since Tom Coughlin left, I guess you could say. Who do you think would be a good fit there?
Yeah, I think they can't. Like, I don't think there's Joe Brady's, the Clint Kubiaks. That's not an option. Joe Judge blew up in their face. McAdoo blew up in their face. Brian Daboll, who after 1 year looked like he was a shooting star, blew up in their face. I'm going to hammer this home, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't know where you stand. I'm out on the Steelers. I think I was wrong a couple weeks ago. I'm like, there's no way they can't win this division. They're in major trouble when you look at the Ravens schedule, when you look at how they're playing. If they miss the playoffs, the Mike Tomlin era is over. It's been over the last couple years, but I think it would officially end. That doesn't mean Mike Tomlin wouldn't immediately be the number one candidate for all these jobs. To me, he makes a lot of sense with the Giants. Just gives them some credibility, gives them some stability. I think another name that's going to be thrown in is Lane Kiffin because of his ties to Jackson Dart. I just think he is making so much money and have so much. He's in such a sweet spot right now in college. I have a hard time in his Southern lifestyle, in which he's talked about pretty dramatic change to come to New York. So to me, I would say Mike Tomlin would be at the top of my list if this Steeler thing continues to crater. And if that doesn't materialize, I think Mike McCarthy would have to make a lot of sense. That they need to get a guy with head coaching experience who's been good. When they hired Tom Coughlin, people forget, especially younger people, when the Panthers and Jaguars were created, the Panthers went all in for George Seifert. They got him to run the operation, and Coughlin ran the Jags operation. So the Jags actually had some moments in the late 90s of being, so Coughlin had, he had trained under Parcells or whatever, but he had been a head coach and had won in the playoffs. So it had made some sense. Like, they need to do that. No more swinging for the fences. And if I was a Giants fan, like, to me, Tomlin, I actually think that just makes a lot of sense.
Would they kick the tires on Bill Belichick, or is that just
I
too
think
far gone?
that ship sailed now.
Yeah, with the girlfriend and the nonsense at North Carolina. You can't take him
I would have,
seriously.
I would have said if there was no nonsense and it had been completely quiet and he had just gone 7-5, it's like, North Carolina, they kind of whatever, maybe. But I think there's been that. That's the Lane. Lane's done a lot to clean up his image, right? I mean, I think there were, the way the things ended at Bama and USC. He couldn't even get interviews at Oregon a couple years ago when Dan Lanning. Like, he couldn't get interviews at these places. Now he's become sober. He's clearly changed his life.
Yeah.
But I do think the Giants, who, are kind of old school and stiff, and that's where Belichick, I think has ruined his chances. Because a couple years ago, I would have been like, yeah, they'll just hire Bill, right? He's a famous coordinator for him, but I have a hard time seeing that now, don't you, with the young quarterback?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I think maybe the league has passed him by. Maybe. I mean,
That'd be fun.
Look at Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's fun, but he's like 73 years old. There's a pretty good chance that he's just washed up at this point here, guys. So sometimes the guy just gets too old. How about my Miami Dolphins there, John? Just beating the living shit out of the Buffalo Bills, like we all predicted on
That
Sunday.
was
So,
awesome.
oh, I loved it. My
Well,
young
unless you
fellow,
had money on the Bills minus 9.5, and you knew that was over about
well,
2
Tua
series
comes
in.
out first drive. Tua comes out and throws an interception, and I'm like, okay, here we go. But we do know how the game went. But the morning of the game, a report came out that the Bills were trying to make a trade for Jalen Waddle. They offered a first in 2027, and I think maybe a second in 2026. And I'm thinking, even as a Dolphins fan, like, hey, I know the Dolphins are stupid, but they're not stupid enough to trade this guy within the division the week that you're playing the team. Like, there wouldn't need to be like a real tax, I think, if they were to trade him
Yeah.
within the division to the Buffalo Bills. So, my question for the Bills is, why didn't you guys have a plan B? You were going all in pretty much to get Waddle, and they end up doing nothing. Do you think the Buffalo Bills botched the trade deadline?
Well, you could only buy, like, if you go into a store and you're looking for, a certain type of steak, if they don't have it, you can't buy it, right? So the teams that were selling, that were willing to sell high end players, turned out to be the two teams in their division. Got a little unlucky that it was the best defensive linemen, Quinn Williams and Jalen Phillips and Jalen Waddle, all are teams that, even though the Bills have nothing in common with the Jets or the Dolphins, right? They're dominating this division. Those two teams are terrible. You just can't make that trade. I honestly, unless you pay, 200% of the value, I still have to be like, I'm not doing this. And I just think it kind of became an unlucky circumstance for Bean. But I also think, like, Waddle, when you're playing in freezing cold temperatures, we saw the Chiefs punt on Tyreek Hill and rattle off Super Bowls. I would have been all over defensive linemen and defensive players. I mean, at the end of the day, you've invested a lot on offense. In Keon Coleman, drafted him high. You've paid Cook. You drafted Kincaid high. You paid Shakir. You almost just got to ride Josh Allen that way with that unit. You need help on defense. I just think that that is the area in which you drafted the kid from Kentucky, who, I think the second touchdown right was right over Harrison in the back right corner of the end zone when Tua hit Waddle for the touchdown. So that's a little concerning. Now, granted, he's been hurt, the first half of the season. He's just coming back, and he showed promise, but they're going to need him to be good to make a run. Let's face it, they have the alarm bell should be going off in Buffalo, right? The Patriots, this is not fake. They remind me a lot. The Niners had more talent, but when Jim Harbaugh got to the 49ers and they immediately won the division and were hosting the NFC Championship. That's what it feels like with Mike Vrabel. The difference is the Niners didn't have a Bills in their division back then. And the Bills have to be a little shell shocked that the Patriots are this good. And not only are they not going away, it feels like they're kind of getting better and better with each week. And now the scary part, if you're the Bills, they just unleashed two guys they haven't even been using, right? In Henderson, who they drafted pretty high, who bust out the two big runs against Tampa, and Kyle Williams, the wide receiver, who can absolutely fly. So if they start integrating those guys with kind of the Vrabel defensive culture and how well Drake Maye has played, I I think the Bills. I saw someone tweeting about this yesterday. Like, there's a pretty good chance, some of our wild cards could be like the Bills and the Chiefs, which sucks for the teams that win the division. That's who you're going to have to draw, and the Chargers.
Yeah, I thought the Patriots were going to hit a wall this past week against the Tampa Bay
Same.
Buccaneers. That was not the case, though. They look fantastic. Drake Maye looked fantastic. Drake Maye is the favorite to win the MVP going into Week 11 of the NFL season. So let's touch on this. So, kind of a funny year for quarterbacks, especially in the AFC. Joe Burrow's not in the mix. Lamar was injured. Patrick Mahomes is still playing at a very high level, obviously. Even a week ago, though, Josh Allen was the favorite to win MVP. But we're going to have some new blood in here. Drake Maye, this incredible ascension. Daniel Jones is revitalizing his career. Bo Nix, everyone's shitting on him, probably deservedly so. But his team is 8-2. So we're going to see some new blood here in the playoffs for the AFC. I know Bo Nix was there last year, but which young quarterback would you trust most in the playoffs? Drake Maye, Daniel Jones, or Bo Nix?
Well, I mean, I just think Drake Maye is better than those other two guys, so I'm trusting him. Like, I think what's fascinating about those other two guys, because I would say there's a pretty good chance. Obviously, the Colts heavy favorite now to win the division, But the Broncos, all they got to do is split with the Chiefs and, the 2-game lead. And at the end of the day, I guess it would technically be 3 if they win this week. The Chargers, I mean, their margin for error with some of their injuries, like they're more than likely going to drop a weird game. The Broncos, those two teams are going to host playoff games. And Jonathan Taylor, to me, is the MVP of that team. So if he gets corralled in one of those games, like the Colts could lose in the first round, right? If Bo Nix, the way he's been playing, they will lose in the playoffs with the game that he just played against the Raiders, with the game that he was playing against the Giants when they were down big, the game that he was playing against the Eagles. You can't just rely on the Tim Tebow magic to just flip a switch for the last couple series, because that's not usually the way it works in the playoffs. So I think definitely Drake Maye. He's more talented. He's just a better player. And he has just been much more consistent than definitely. I mean, it's hard to compare Drake Maye to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has been in the league a long time. But the one thing you see with Daniel Jones, and he's a better athlete than these guys, but like the knock was always on Cousins. And I think Jared Goff is not only when you hit them, but when you just don't let them get comfortable, because they are not running quarterbacks. That they were, especially Goff now that Cousins is done. He's basically an outlier in the league. He is a pocket quarterback that can't move. 20 years ago, that's the only quarterback in the NFL. Now every single guy has good mobility, let alone the majority of guys can like run, right? I mean, they were running. I didn't even view Jackson Dart as a quote unquote runner. And the best play they have is like quarterback power. So it's like Jared Goff couldn't run quarterback power, if his life depended on it. If you can move those guys around, Daniel Jones starts getting moved around and he just looks different. Now, luckily, Tyler Warren, I don't know where you stand on Tyler Warren, but to me, he has been a dominant force. How do you cover him? He's just too tall, and his ball skills are just too, like Devontae Smith last night.
Yeah.
Well, Devontae Smith won the Heisman. He's one of the best college receivers we've ever seen, comes in the league and dominant. Tyler Warren has that level ball skills on a guy that's 6'5". So it's most teams, I guess Seattle has Emin Worry that's 6'3", but most teams, their tall linebacker or DB is like 6'1", 6'2". How do you cover that? Look at the Atlanta game; they're all over him. You just throw it up like an alley oop to Kevin Garnett. It was awesome. He's been a great pick for Chris Ballard.
I'm thinking we might be due for a weird Super Bowl. Sam Darnold versus Daniel Jones in the Super Bowl. Sign me up for it. I don't want to watch Chiefs Eagles again. Okay, let's get into a couple of best bets here, John. We got a couple of really big games. The Chiefs coming off their bye. They're in Denver. Let's see how Denver does against a really serious division team. But you have targeted two of the other big games. You like the Seahawks. They're a 2-point underdog against the Rams.
Well, here's the thing about a lot of these big games, like the Bills and the Chiefs, or the Broncos and the Chiefs, the Packers, teams like that. Their home field advantage. The Eagles or the Lions, whoever. I think that game's in Philly, but they have home field advantages. At the end of the day, the Rams just don't. They simply just don't. It's not quite the Chargers, but it's not like if this game was in Seattle. Seattle has a massive home field advantage. So I personally, if you just say neutral field, like a bowl game, I think Seattle is better. Obviously, based on his history, you just trust, even if you say Sam Darnold has been Matt Stafford's equal this year, and they've both been just elite quarterbacks, which is true. But you just trust Stafford because he's done it longer and been a much better player for a longer period of time. But based on this year and based on the last 2 years, like Sam Darnold's every bit as good. I just think the roster for Seattle is just a little bit better because both have awesome defensive lines, both have explosive offenses, assuming Devontae Adams is going to be okay. Because that'd be a pretty big, if that tweak, we'll have to see as the week goes on with him practicing. He's got 8 touchdowns. I mean, you sign a wide receiver. Again, he wasn't just some random wide receiver. He's like a Hall of Famer. And he gives you, 12 to 14 touchdowns. That's an incredible signing. He has been a dominant red zone player. I don't know, because he's a dominant red zone player. So and they have a rapport immediately like Rodgers and him had. So that's something definitely to monitor. Like, is he completely fine? That was just a back tweak. Is it something that he's going to have to battle through? Is he out this week? That'd be a big swing. But regardless, to me, the difference of these two teams is the Rams DBs are not good. Their pass rush in their front is awesome, but Mac Jones is lighting them up like a Christmas tree. he's not throwing to Jerry Rice and Terrell Owens. He's throwing to Kendrick Bourne and like Demarcus Robinson. So the Seattle, like the one thing that jumps out to me about Seattle, beside like Darnold and that career resurrection, is their secondary is so fast and so physical. And that was kind of like what Mike, when you go back to the Ravens a couple years ago, why it's still kind of stunning that team didn't win a Super Bowl, is their defense was an unstoppable force on the back end, right? If you get the right players, your defensive line is going to be good if me and you are coaching them. But you need to nail picks in the secondary because you can't just coach up random safety or corner to be good. Like that's a position about like I can manipulate the front with blitzes and stuff, but you can either cover or you can't, right? You just like you can't teach what like Fangio would be the first to say like I'm not teaching Quinyon Mitchell like he can stay in these guys' hip pockets. It's a God-given ability, right? And they have DBs and the Rams. I just think they can't really cover that well, and that ultimately could be the downfall of this team, is just their secondary because they're going to face, obviously in the playoffs, you're just facing the best quarterbacks, the best schemes, the best players. And that to me is why if I, not just in this game, but just big picture, I like Seattle to win this game. I like Seattle to win this division. And I think Seattle has a legitimate chance. As long as Sam, doesn't turn into a pumpkin, I would imagine once you get to the playoffs, people are going to be blitzing them because that's what happened in the last two games last season when he fell apart. If he just plays, doesn't even need to play like he's playing right now, just a solid player, I think they can win the Super Bowl.
JSN, one hell of a season. I saw a
Looks
stat.
like Jerry Rice.
Well, what was the stat? He joins kind of unusual company, Michael Irving and Antonio Brown, as the only receivers to have 75 plus receiving yards in the first 10 games of the season. It's like, well, hopefully he follows in their footsteps from a on-field perspective. Okay, let's wrap things up. Heavyweight matchup here. Philadelphia hosting the Lions. The Lions who beat the crap out of the Commanders 13-0 against the spread in games after an outright loss, by the way, now for the Lions. Been riding that one for a while, but they're going to look to keep it going. Small underdog in Philadelphia, and you like the underdog again. You like Detroit.
Yeah, I think the Eagles, that game in Lambeau, playing in the cold. I mean, I can't even imagine what time those guys got into their beds. I don't know if you heard the press conference from Sirianni, but even at halftime, like he sounded sick. So you got your head coach, he's probably battling something. He's getting no sleep. They've been at the office. I bet they got off the plane and just went right to the office, double fisting coffee. So these guys are exhausted. The players, I mean, that game was such a physical game. I would imagine they won't even be able to practice on Wednesday. It'll be like glorified walkthroughs. The Lions got a JV team in the Commanders, but obviously the news for them, and this is going to take Dan Campbell, if he continues to do this and he's good at it, to another level. Like the Harbaugh brothers. I call Dan Campbell the third Harbaugh brother. The Harbaugh brothers cannot call plays, which is ironic because Jim Harbaugh was a quarterback. He cannot call plays. Never has, never will. John Harbaugh obviously has nothing. Like he can't call the offense, not an offensive guy, but the defense, he has nothing to do with it. So it's like Dan Campbell just proved, boom. Now, against the Commanders, this is a different level. Fangio, this personnel. But if he's good at it and he's got the players, and honestly, he should just copy some of the scripts that Ben Johnson left behind over the years. So you can just mix that together. I think the Lions can get right back into the mix of like, okay, they're right there on the tier with the Eagles, with the Rams, with Seattle. I do think when we see them play Green Bay again, I'm going to like their chances if Jordan Love is going to play like that. So I just like the Lions in this spot. Plus, I just think the Eagles, when you look at their schedule, they just had to win one of these two games, and they're going to rattle off a ton of wins. Now, you do get a little home field boost. So it's going to be, loud and aggressive. I haven't checked the weather, but, the wild card, Jared Goff sometimes. I lived in Philly. It can, the Northeast, it can get cold fast. That's not exactly Jared Goff. Jared Goff likes a dome or like 78 degrees. So that's always something to keep an eye on. But what is Dan Campbell, back to the Ben Johnson thing? Well, we'll try to run the ball 35 times, right?
Oh, yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. Okay, John, we will leave it at that for today. Great spot per usual. Thank you for joining. Enjoy all the games this weekend. Best of luck with your bets, and we'll catch you again next week.
See you, my man.